everybody, and welcome to another edition of our Heart to Heart podcast. On today's show, we have a friend of mine named Ale Cardinalle, and she's here to share her own personal journey as being an international adoptee. Her story is worth turning into a telenovela. When I first heard it on a podcast myself, listening to it, I just could not believe that this was a true story of how she found out she was adopted, how she found her biological family, how her family grew from this experience, and how it made her just set the path for what it was that she was supposed to do with the rest of her life, as she's now an advocate. So without further ado, Ale, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So from the moment I heard your story, I was just blown away. I remember listening to your story in the car. I love to hear podcasts when I'm dropping kids off from school and I'm stuck in traffic on the way home. And I remember thinking, this deserves to turn into a TV show. It's just crazy. I cannot believe you lived through this, and I'm dying to jump into it. But first and foremost, please introduce yourself.
So, like you said, my name is Ale, and I am an international adoptee, adopted from Brazil. And I'm a mom. I have two little boys, and I'm a social worker and former teacher. And like you said, I speak truth to adoption and the adoption industry in my practice and online, specifically TikTok.
So we're going to get into all of that in a moment. But I want to explore the early part of your discovery, because you commented on the podcast that I listened to that you just had this feeling in your bones that you were adopted at a very young age. How did you even feel that so young? What got you going?
So it's hard to say because it's not too odd of an experience for a child to learn about like what adoption is and wonder if they could be adopted. But I don't think it was quite like that for me. It was definitely a knowing. And, I can't say for sure, but I believe my body remembered that adoption happened to me. I believe my body remembered being separated from my biological mother. And it's not a far-fetched belief because we know mothers and fetuses that turn into babies are neurobiologically connected. We are wired for survival. Mammals, of the mammals, the human species is the most dependent on their mothers. We are carry animals. We don't come out of the womb walking on our own. Anyway, and I believe my body didn't forget this disruption, and I might have not always had the words for it or couldn't explain how it was relevant to my experience, especially because I didn't know I was adopted.
Was that something that was just never discussed in your home, or was it just a don't ask, don't tell, or just waiting for the right moment?
So my dad wanted to never tell me. Like, if he had it his way back then, I would be here today. Well, I wouldn't be on this podcast, I guess. But he never wanted me to know. And I have three sisters, and I am the only adoptee. I am one of four girls of my parents, and of the four of us, I'm the only adoptee. And my dad explained that his intention of not to tell me is because he never wanted me to feel any different than his other daughters, that I was his daughter, and it didn't matter how I came into the family, I was his. And my mom, as she tells me, was not completely on board with line of thinking and that I should know. And it was an argument between them. And he eventually won out. But like we were saying, my body knew. I had a knowing. And I tell this story of when I was probably about 6 years old. I was in the bathroom taking a bath, and I was in there with my mom and my older sister. And I was, in the bubbles, and I said, I know I'm adopted. And my older sister, it has cerebral palsy and is nonverbal, and she just started to like wail and scream and like like ah. And my mom just froze. And then she didn't say anything either way. And time goes on, years go on, and I'm in sixth grade, so I had to be 11 or 12. And I start to put pieces together, but I still don't know for sure. So now my younger sisters are twins that were conceived through IVF. And my mom always talks about that journey. They were born in 1990, so it was very early in the science. So it's a very exciting story. And she was pregnant with twins and her belly was huge. And that was a big part of the story, how people would turn around in public to watch her. If she stood in the door frame, she almost touched the other side. And she's a pretty petite woman. And so one of the twins was having the silliest tantrum about how she's not really in this family, that she's adopted. And I'm just like rolling my eyes thinking like that can't be true. Like we know literally you were made in a dish. and and we have pictures of mom pregnant with you. And so then I started to think about myself and I was like, none of that is true for me. And I also had to travel with a green card from Brazil. And I had a Brazilian passport. And that was always explained to me. I was like, you were born in Brazil. And I never asked why. And why would you be in your last trimester and going on vacation?
Right.
But now I'm 11 or 12 and I'm starting to have questions. And so I had all of these clues, but I really want to drive home that more than all the clues, I just knew. I knew it to be true. And so I actually went to school and told my friends that I was adopted before I even had it confirmed. And I knew that the school was going to call home. And so I was like,
do you think that subconsciously you kind of dug that in to open the conversation with your parents?
It's very, very, very possible. And so I went home that day and I will never forget it. My mom was on her bed and I said, am I adopted? And I knew she was going to say yes. I knew she was going to say yes, and she did. And that's when she explained that why I wasn't told. And it was a lot of information. And then she let me stay home the next day from school and she took me to the mall and just showed me a lot of attention. And my dad still wanted to keep it a secret. And obviously
wow.
my older sister knew because she was about 5 years old when I was adopted. And my younger sisters didn't know. And I didn't know until I did. And so he told me not to tell them or tell anyone, but I had already told literally everyone at school. And all he
Kids
said,
don't lie.
all he said was, again, you're our daughter. It's nobody's business. We wanted you. And that's
So
it.
he still wanted to keep secrecy around your adoption.
Yes. Yes, he
Did
did.
they give you all the details at that moment of your adoption or just confirmation?
So I don't know how many details they had. My adoption is different in a lot of ways. I was not adopted through an agency. I was an independent adoption, which means, my parents were represented by lawyers. My biological mom was represented by lawyers, and they did it without any agency oversight. Also, Brazil is not a country that typically allows international adoption. They want Brazilian children to be raised in Brazil by Brazilian families. And so my mom had to petition a judge to allow this adoption. And
Wow.
yeah, so obviously that happened for her. And I just like to point out that it's 1988. She doesn't speak Portuguese at all. And she had a little yellow dictionary and is in front of a judge, like word by word, um, trying to plead the case that she would make a good mother to this baby.
That's
Uh,
amazing.
it's yeah. So I have only met a couple of other Brazilian adoptees, but they were adopted in Brazil and then moved to the United States later, like with their Brazilian family. And
Wow.
yeah, so my story is pretty unique in that way.
So you find out you're adopted at the age of 11, and it's almost like a sense of confirmation for you. After you get over that sense of, I knew it, and it really started to settle in, how did things unravel for you?
So when I'm 11 or 12, I think it's a really cool thing about me. It's like I said, it's something I want to tell everybody. I eventually did tell my sisters, and it was fine. I mean, I don't remember it being a huge deal. I remember that like little jaws dropping. But but yeah, I mean, I'm Latina, but I'm a white Latina, and my family is Italian American, so I don't really stick out as, the adopted one. And it wasn't something really top of mind. And, whether my dad didn't want me to know or anyone to know because of his own fears or insecurity, I think it's part of it. But I also think that what he said was true. He never wanted me to feel any differently than his biological daughters, and I never did. I never ever did. To this day, I never ever have.
You were saying that your dad, from that moment on, just wanted to keep that kind of as a family secret.
Yes, he did. And so I always felt that it would be hurtful or make people uncomfortable if I even talked about being adopted. So I didn't.
Yeah.
And also, it was something that was easily able to fade into the background because, like I'm saying, I don't look particularly so much different than my adoptive family that it's like, oh, there's the adopted one. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it was kind of like that for years until I got into my later teenage years. And I struggled a lot with my mental health from pretty early age. I was in therapy when I was 8 years old. I was a very withdrawn child, easily distracted. And I had a lot of trouble socially, like making friends, keeping friends, making the right friends. And all of this, started to get more and more serious as I got older and started, engaging in some risky behaviors and experimenting with different things. And now I got to an age where I started to have real questions. Where did I come
Sure.
from? Why am I adopted? Things that really weren't top of mind in my early adolescence. But then,
Sure.
the older I got, the more intense my feelings were getting. I was a teenage girl, and
Right.
and then I felt like I didn't have the space to still, I didn't feel I had the space to talk about this, and I really didn't. Um, and the few times that I did bring it up in the past, my dad was upset, and I felt that I was hurting his feelings. And so
Right.
now I'm just really struggling. I had a lot of years where I had increasingly more serious mental health issues going on, major depression and uh, a form of anxiety called depersonalization, where I started to feel like I wasn't real, things weren't real. And I had a relationship, one of my first boyfriends or person that I dated ended really abruptly and violently, and it wasn't something that I bounced back from. This depersonalization got really scary, and I had thought that I lost my mind. I thought I was, broken and mentally ill forever. And, I don't know how to explain this to somebody that hasn't been through it, but it's like watching a movie that's really strange to you and you can't turn it off. And so it's my life. I'm watching it, but I don't feel a part of it. And this just got worse and worse and worse. And I got to a point where I felt like I was going to be like this forever. I didn't know how to talk about it to anyone. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was broken. And I thought the only way out of this was not to live anymore. And
Oh,
and so I got help. I got help and I went into a couple of different treatment programs. I got stabilized first, and then I went to a treatment center, a 3-month treatment center. And
oh wow.
yeah, and I started to feel better. And I did get stabilized. I felt real in the world. And now I was well enough to start dealing with some of the underlying issues that got me here in the first place. And so now I'm 22 years old, and this treatment center was in Florida. We're from New Jersey. So my parents flew down for a family session that my therapist insisted on, and she sat my mom and my dad and me and said, "We're going to talk about adoption today." And
Oh,
that therapy session changed the trajectory of maybe my life, not to be dramatic, but
right. Yeah.
but it was the first time that we had an open conversation. My dad cried, and he's like a
Oh,
Jersey Italian guy. And my mom said her piece about what she wanted to do differently. And not that everything was solved and resolved in that conversation, but it completely shattered the ice, where I
sure.
finally felt safe to acknowledge the fact that I even am adopted. And like I said, it wasn't all healed and all perfect after that, but it was a huge step in my own healing and our healing as a family.
Well, it
And
finally allowed you to open up to your family.
exactly, exactly. And
Wow.
so then, years now more down the line, I started to know that the struggles that I was having, a lot of other adoptees were having the same struggles. I had really great parents that loved me a lot and did everything they could do to give me opportunities and a really privileged life, and I still struggled with the things that I described. And in my treatment center, I don't know, I'm trying to remember how many women there were. I would say the max 30. It had to be less, but let's say 30. Three of us were adoptees. So,
Wow.
so if you think that's 10% of the 10% of the residents there, and 2% of the population is adopted. So
Wow.
so it's like a statistic that, adoptees are overrepresented in settings like this, hospitalizations, treatment centers. And I was seeing
Wow.
this statistic in front of my face. And also the other adoptees that I, grew up with also had some struggles. And so, very slowly I start to put the pieces together that one, this is an experience that adoptees often experience, and I began to understand that my reaction to losing that boyfriend really had very little to do with that boyfriend and this hitting that trauma wound of loss and abandonment. And so that was the start of my healing journey and having these words and understanding to put to my experience that nothing was ever wrong with me. Something happened to me, and I was reacting in turn in a way that made sense when I was able to understand the consequences of this neurobiological disruption between adoptee and their biological mother.
That is fascinating. Wow. My mind was when you explained that to me. Can you speak a little to once that opened the door in your family dynamic to discuss it? Was it something that just became very easy for you to fall into, or was it a gradual process with your parents and your sisters to talk about it at home?
So my sisters were like, it was always whatever,
Okay.
it was not the same as it was with my parents. And it did make it a little bit easier, but I still was like teetering the line of,
Okay.
um, not wanting to upset anybody or seem like I didn't love my parents or I wasn't,
Sure.
thankful for my life. And so,
Sure.
so I felt safer to, talk about the fact that I am adopted and I didn't come from my mom's womb and stuff like that. But as far as,
Mhm.
it wasn't something I was bringing up very often
Sure. Right. Of
still.
course. Of course.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then, I thought about searching a few times. When I was in college, I went home and I needed to find my high school diploma to apply for something. I don't even remember what, but I'm like going through papers in my mom's office trying to find my diploma. And I found the folder of my adoption papers, which I had never seen in my life. And I guess this answers your questions of how safe I felt to feel about things. I stole them. Like I just put them in my suitcase and flew them back to
No.
Miami. And I didn't say anything to anyone.
No way. And
Yeah.
at this point, I want to bring up the complete coincidence that I reached out to you on Instagram right after I heard your podcast, having no idea that you're a fellow Miami Hurricane and that
Yeah.
you were down here in Miami at the University of Miami getting your education degree.
Yes.
So you're a fellow Miami Hurricane, Bill Kane,
Cocaine.
Bill Kane. And you and I have the similarity that we both went through the education program at the University of Miami together.
Yes. Yes,
I
we
mean,
did.
what a coincidence is that? So at this
I know.
point, you're living in Miami, you're at the University of Miami, and you steal your adoption file and
So
to
I
stick
want
it
to
in your
mention
suitcase.
something else about, yes, I put it in my
Yeah,
suitcase, and I want to mention something else about the experience of living in Miami as a
yeah,
Latina woman, because
yes.
like I grew up in like New Jersey, suburbia, very mostly white area in
Mm-hmm.
Miami from the first day that I moved there to almost every day somebody would approach me and assume I speak Spanish.
Oh, for
Or
sure.
and I want to tell another story. So there, and that was something I never experienced before. And even though
Mm.
Brazilians, the language is Portuguese, not Spanish, that's, beside the point. I was working at a restaurant on Miami Beach, Prime Italian, and there was
Yeah.
there was a big party of these Brazilian guys, and I was their hostess, and um they yelled out "Brasileira" when they saw me, and I just burst into tears. It was the first time that had ever happened to
Oh,
me in my whole life that somebody pointed out to me and was like, "She's Brazilian. She's one of us." And it was this really,
so cool.
powerful moment. And then they were like asking me to go out with them afterwards, which I did not do. This is besides the point. But I
Allie,
like,
let me ask you a question that I have yet to ask you, actually. So, being that you were born and raised in New Jersey, suburbia, and you come to Miami, and you mentioned before that you felt it in your bones, in your body, that you were adopted. When you got to Miami, did you feel that connection to our culture?
so it's hard because I felt like within and without, right? Like I
Because
am
I know
this.
you mentioned that you were a very touchy feely person with your
Mhm.
family, and that you always had that innate, like, let's hug, let's cuddle. And your sisters are like, no, not really.
Yeah, no. So, yeah, and it's funny because I went to college after I got out of that treatment center. So, like I said, I was 22. And so I was 22 and a sophomore in college. So I was a little bit older than my fellow classmates. And so I moved downtown. I didn't live in Coral Gables where the campus is. And most of my friends were people I met in my building and people I met through my building and like girls I met at work, other hostesses, and almost everybody is Latino or Hispanic. And so it was a little bit bittersweet because I was finally, around people that are at least adjacent to my culture. I had a lot of Colombian friends, South American friends,
Right.
and but then it was like I can't dance like them and I don't talk like them. And so it was
Right.
kind of like, you know,
Bittersweet.
yeah, yeah, and like a goose that was raised by chickens, and now I'm with other geese, but I act like a chicken, And
So, what did
uh,
you do with that folder?
okay, so I get back to my little studio apartment in downtown Miami, and I
Uh-huh.
take it out of my suitcase, and the first thing I remember is seeing my name as Alexandra Alves for like on my original birth certificate. And that was so bizarre to me to think that until my adoption was finalized, I was a different person, a different name. I was a Brazilian. I had a
Right.
Brazilian, mom on my birth certificate. And so I saw her name for the first time too. And for adoptees that were in completely closed adoptions like mine, any little piece of the puzzle means everything. And when I'm in community with other adoptees, it's something that we just see eye to eye here. Any little morsel of information you have about who you are and where you came from is like so coveted. So
Right. Right.
this piece of information was huge, huge,
Right.
huge, huge. And so the first thing I did was search her up on Facebook. And her name Alves is like not a unique last name in Brazil. You'll probably go to walk down the
Right.
street and you can find 20 Alveses. And
Mhm.
so I knew the area where I was born. So I like searched it up all in Facebook and I saw, I don't know, maybe like 20 people with this same name living in the same area. And
Right.
at the time, my family, my adoptive family, was going through some issues, nothing to do with me personally, but just like family things, big changes going on. And I was like, this is not the time for this. And
Wow.
so I put it away. I put it to the back of my mind, and I eventually admitted to my mom that I did this, that I had the folder. And she was like, Allie, like, you could have told me. It's okay. She's like, but I do want them back because I don't want you to lose them. Which
I don't
which
trust you with your birth certificate. You need to give it back so I can put it back under the mattress.
well, I mean, it's not completely unwarranted. I do tend to be a little disorganized.
Can you tell the story of your birthday gift and how you had asked for something in particular to find your birth
Sure.
family, and how your older sister just lost it laughing because she had the missing piece you needed?
Yes. Okay. So,
Okay.
like I said, at that point, I put it away, put it to the back of my mind. And even in my own, you know, I would go back and forth of whether this is something I wanted or something I wanted to look into. And then it was going to be my 28th birthday, and my mom and my sister, my older sister, went to this therapeutic massage therapist. Oh, I guess that's redundant. A massage therapist who was also a psychic medium. And
Lovely.
and so I asked for a gift certificate to go see Sandy, and my mom was like, why? And I said to her, maybe she'll connect with somebody in my biological family and I could have like some insight. And my mom was like, okay. But then my sister, Tonielle, we were all at the kitchen table and she starts screaming and going nuts and laughing. And so I'll try to make a long story short. How I was matched, I guess, with my family is my sister, who has cerebral palsy. My mom hired a Brazilian woman named Anna to help take care of her. And so my parents were trying to conceive, and then we're thinking about adoption. And Anna's sister-in-law and her brother were OBGYNs in Brazil. And by some alignment of the stars, they were connected with a patient who was pregnant with me. And so that's how I got matched in this like weird, I don't know, domino effect. And
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so Tonielle, my sister, my older sister, is friends with Anna on Facebook. And, then basically she's communicating, all right, you're being really silly because we can just, send Anna a message and she can probably hook you back up. And that's exactly what happened. So Anna, Tonielle's old caretaker, gave me Gizani. That was her sister-in-law's, her Facebook. And that was my biological mom's doctor. And also, I was basically in some kind of informal foster care with Gizani and her husband while this adoption was finalized. So my mom's doctors took me home to their house until, this all got sorted and I went to the United States.
Your OBG, the doctor, the OB that delivered you, took you home for 4 months and
yeah
took care of you until your mom was ready to bring you home. That is wow.
Wild. Yes. Wild. Very strange and different. And so I messaged Gizani on Facebook, and I'm still not sure what I want out of all of this. And Gizani doesn't answer me. And then my adoptive mom, messaged Gizani and says, it's okay, you can talk to her. Seconds later, I get a message from Gizani.
Wow.
And
she was waiting for permission.
Yeah, which whatever. I was a adult woman, but it's okay, whatever. And
wow. I guess it's mom code.
yeah, I guess it is mom code. That's a good way of putting it. And so I'd never asked Giovanni to do anything. I just wanted to say like, hey, the baby you took care of and 28 years later, and this is what I'm doing in my life, and thanks for keeping me safe, basically. And And she's like, okay, well, she's like, I'm in the north, your mom's in the south. I'm gonna put a message on a radio station. I didn't ask for any of this, but I was like, okay, like it's in the universe's hands. And it was so fast. So in my biological mom's little Brazilian town, like little cars drive around playing the radio station. And so they said her name and they were like, if anyone knows her, have her call. And so that's how they found her. And so Jazani, like a day later, was like, this is her phone number, this is her Facebook, this is her address, and she's waiting to hear from you. And that's how we found each other. And so I looked
Describe
her
that
up.
moment.
It was surreal. I was teaching at the time, which is also like a full circle moment because I wound up being an ESL teacher, and all my students are Latino, Latina, Hispanic students. And so it was another thing of like, I keep, finding myself in these circles. But anyway, and then they always knew what was going on. Couldn't remember how they got all into my business, but um, I got the text message. And I guess it was
Beautiful.
because we were talking about how, I'm South American or whatever. But anyway, I got the Facebook message from Shazani with all of this information. And it's like in the middle of class. And I like put my phone, like, I can't right now. And my students knew what was going on. And I had like a little rectangle window. And I was like, I'm not going to look till after school. I had like a million little faces like trying to peek into the window as I was on my work computer at school, like desktop computer, and I went into Facebook and I saw her picture for the first time and like trying to think of like, did I see this picture all these years ago in Miami when I was searching up her name? And so that day I did send her a message. I looked up her address on Google Earth to see her house
Oh,
uh and uh and that day I found out that I had three siblings in Brazil that always knew about me, which really put my heart to rest because one of the reasons I went back and forth about searching was, what if this woman moved on with her life and I just wasn't a part of it and I would upset her, I would upset her family, or she has other kids that don't know. And one of the first messages, she was like, I've been waiting for this day for 28 years.
oh,
And that same day, I got a message from all my siblings, from cousins, and I'm in Google Translate, translating these messages back and forth.
right.
And it was just a really surreal day. And
That's
it took a little
amazing.
while to get into like real questions, and the big question is always going to be why? Why did this happen? How did this happen? Why am I an adoptee? Why am I adopted? And so she explained her story, and really briefly, she was orphaned as a teenager, and she had an on and off again boyfriend, and she had a baby with him. And she was struggling to survive. She had her as a teenager, and my sister went to go live with her paternal grandparents, and my biological mom took a job as a live-in nanny. And so when she found out she was pregnant with me, her boss, the woman whose house she was living in, was like, you live here to work and you can't live here with a baby. And so Jazani was actually this lady's doctor. And so she bought my biological mom to her, which is how, like I said, this weird collision of dominoes. And and
There's
so
another coincidence, huge coincidence to your story here,
yeah,
which
so
is Go ahead.
Right. So I wound up being adopted by Americans, and we already had Anna, who was a Brazilian woman, but later on we had another young lady who was about 19 years old at the time, who my mom met while she was in Brazil. This young woman wanted to come to America, and so she said, come work for us. And so this woman came, and she like has, I still know her and love her to this day, but she's been in my life my whole life. At one point she went back to Brazil and got married and had a family, and and then at another point she left her baby in Brazil, because of the circumstances. The way that she could take care of him best was go to the United States to make money and send money back home and not be with her baby, which is devastating. And my own biological mother had to be separated from her baby and was helped as a live-in nanny, was raising someone else's child. And so the irony there is pretty painful. And so after hearing this and how uncaringly her boss handled this whole situation, how cold she was, my heart broke for her. And it was the first time I knew that she really wanted me, and she was already struggling to parent the daughter that she had. This wasn't a woman who was doing anything, that would be unsafe for a child. She was just surviving. And so a couple years later, not long after, which is actually I've learned now is not very uncommon, she got married and had more kids. And you know, I I've been reading a lot of research, and it's something that happens a lot, that not long after an adoption, an expectant mother gets pregnant and parents her child. But
Mhm.
anyway, and so she told me this story and how she struggled with her own mental health for years with depression because of this loss. And she asked me if I could ever forgive her. And it never, in all my years, it never occurred to me that I had something to forgive her for. But I also, I guess I didn't consider her experience as much as I was considering mine, which I guess is
Sure.
fair. And my heart just broke, and I sobbed. And
Sure.
spring break was coming up for my district, and I told I was like, I'm going to Brazil. That was like, I made that decision in that moment after, that text message exchange with her. And my dad is like, this is not going to like a major city. Like, this is, kind of out of the way. Like, how are you going to know what to do? And I'm like, well, you guys did it without the internet. But
Right. With a little book.
yeah, but my dad was like, I want your mom to take you. And so we wound up going together and staying with Gisani, the doctor. So
Another
another like,
full circle.
yeah. So 28 years later, we're staying with her, and which was helpful because Gisani is the only person that was in that orbit that speaks English. So that was
Okay.
really helpful.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so we go to Brazil, and um my one of the first things we do is she's like, okay, we're going to go to your mom's house now. And I was like, oh my God, can I take a shower? Like, I was so nervous. And so we went together, and we pulled up to the house, and my biological mom is just on the lawn, like crying and screaming. And she's just like hugging me and holding me. And she's a little lady. She is very petite. I'm I'm like 5'6", almost 5'7". I don't know if she's 5'2", and
Mm.
I just like tower over her. and she's just like holding me and hugging me, like she wants to like
Oh,
lift me in the air. And then my mom, my American mom and my Brazilian mom are just like holding each other and crying, and everybody's
so
crying. And then
beautiful.
we go into the house, and this lady who I've never met in my life before pulls me onto her lap, and she's looking at my fingers and she's looking at my toes, like she's looking at her baby for the first time in, almost 30 years.
That is
And
so beautiful.
yeah, so um, it was a perfect trip. Like I have a younger sister who we just like fell into the easiest relationship. Um, And so it was really, like you said, it was a beautiful thing.
And how lucky are you to have actually found your biological family when so many adoptees don't have that luxury or that
Yeah.
family that supports it?
Yeah. So I have been in community with adoptees for coming up on 10 years now. And so I have heard a lot of stories, and a couple of things can happen when things, aren't such a good story. One, they search and people have passed away. Or there's a secondary rejection where something I was afraid of is them saying I've moved on with this part of my life, my family doesn't know. And that's something that does happen. And
Right,
also it's not easy to build a relationship for everyone, for
right,
whatever the circumstances may be.
right.
And a lot of people are hurt and have experienced trauma and extreme grief that they've never moved through. So reunion isn't easy, even in the best of circumstances.
Absolutely right. Sure. Well, you started your career in education, then it morphed into social work, and during COVID, you actually found your advocate voice through social media. Can you talk
Yeah.
more about that?
Yeah. So, like you said, I was a teacher, and more than the academic side of it, I loved building relationships with my students. I loved being around them. I loved being a support for them. I was that teacher where, my kids were coming to me to open up about things, and, especially the population that I was working with, that was so important. Most of them were very new to the country. And so I started doing trainings on social emotional learning. And then I decided that I wanted to kind of change course. And so I got my degree in social work. And then when I graduated, COVID came not very long after. So my whole
Mhm.
plan was to be a therapist and get my clinical license. And then the world took a left turn. And so to make money, I started reselling my clothes on Poshmark, and I started to work online. And then I still had this desire to work with people and help people feel better. So I started working with small business owners and entrepreneurs who were also struggling with anxiety. And so I was building this little online coaching business. And so
Mhm.
during the pandemic, TikTok was like now becoming the thing. And so I went onto TikTok to, promote my business. And then I saw this video of an adoptive parent completely oversharing the adoptee in their life stories, giving details that was nobody's business. And so I sent a message to this person, friendly message, like, hey, like you might want to know as an adoptee that this is their story to tell, and maybe you want to dial back the details. I, Naive me, I thought they were going to say, oh, that makes total sense. Let me stop.
Right.
Instead, I got blocked. And it really upset me, or I was shocked, which I wouldn't probably be so shocked nowadays. I've been a little my skin has toughened up since then. But so I made a video talking right to camera saying what I said to that person in the message, that adoptees' stories are theirs to tell. The circumstances of our adoption are details that we should be able to share only if we want to,
And
especially with the understanding that throughout our lives, like every little piece of information, like I said, is so coveted and important. And for somebody else to take it upon themselves to share that stuff is something that myself and other adoptees who feel like me really, really take issue with. And
sure,
so I made that video, and other adoptees started to comment back. And then I realized that there was a very small, but there was a community of other adoptees. And I was still trying to promote my business. And then I don't know, it just snowballed into more and more and more adoption content. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I understand wanting to be a parent more than anything in the whole world. And I want every person to find a path to parenthood that is not wrought with ethical issues and does not start with loss. And I would like to see biological families stay together whenever that is safe and possible, and that child is loved and wanted. And so, yes, it is a big topic that we could talk about for a very long time, and I would love to come back to talk
that
about
would
that.
be amazing. I would love to dive more into this. I mean, there's just so much out there that we really don't know about in terms of the world of adoption. I, for one, I'm learning along with everything you share. And I found your story just, I can't help but wonder, hindsight's 2020. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell Ali 15 years ago?
So if I, the adult Ali, knowing what I know, could talk to this child, I would tell her that the way that she's feeling is normal or typical for, well, first I'd tell her that she's adopted because she deserves to know. and and that I would say some of the struggles that she's having are really common for other adopted people too, and that there is nothing wrong with her, and that she is creative, and she has a strong sense of right and wrong, and it's okay to lean into that, and you're going to find your people, and you're going to find your voice, and it is okay to express how you feel. And if you don't feel safe talking to mom and dad, there you have aunts and uncles and grandparents and a therapist or a journal. It is okay to feel how you feel, and it's okay to find somewhere where you can express that.
Yeah.
I think
And is
that's
that
what I
what
would say.
you tell the families that you consult with today? How do you
Yeah.
guide them?
So I think the most important thing that I tell the adoptive parents is their number one job is to create an environment where all feelings are okay, all questions are okay, and helping them build that environment of security and safety, and building up their children and being as open and honest as they can be. And another important thing is it's okay to say, I don't know, and we can find out if that's possible. And I also help these families make an adoption as open as possible, um, to support that connection between an adoptee and who they are and where they come from. And so that could look like a different things from family to family, but that's what I'm supporting families in doing. And so the adoptee in their life never has to have this discovery that I had, which we call coming out of the fog, right? When we see that adoption is actually really nuanced, and there is pain and there is grief and there are these practices that we need to look at. And so for a lot of adoptees, we call this, like I said, coming out of the fog. And so I help adoptive parents raise children that never have to have this experience.
Ali, if somebody's looking for you today, where can they reach you for more information and more assistance?
Sure. So you can always reach out to me on my website, which is wildheartcollective.care. And there you can send me an email and check out some resources, and also my platform to learn more about what we've been talking about today is on TikTok. You can either search my name and you'll find me, or Wild Heart Collective _.
Ali, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today and being so open and honest. We love to open doors here. Nothing is off the table at Heartful Living. We're all just trying to get through life together and enjoying the journey along the way. And we're so appreciative that you've been so open and honest today.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell my story and speak truth to this.
Thank you. And I hope you'll come back and we could dive deeper into more, because I find it something that, not a lot of people talk about, and it's definitely worth shining light on.
I would love to. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ali. Bye, everybody. Have a good day.